What is going on, Neon Nation, and welcome back to the Neon Arcade for some more Cyberpunk 2077 news. Today we're going over a developer Q&A which happened at the CD Projekt Polish community meeting in Warsaw, where we learned a ton of amazing new details about Cyberpunk. Now shout out to these two Reddit users for posting these separate threads. We got a lot of insight about the game, and honestly more news than we've gotten in probably the past 3 to 4 months. There's some really cool details you guys are not going to want to miss, so stay tuned. So first question of the Q&A is if there's actually an option to do exactly what Johnny says and burn the city down, and the response was of course. Now we're not really sure what Johnny's motives are in Cyberpunk 2077. He's changed a lot apparently since 2020. I mean, the guy was pretty much dead at the end of 2020, so we're gonna have to wait and see what his motives are, what he's trying to do in the world. Are we gonna tag along with him? Is he gonna tag along with us? It's gonna be really interesting, but we can burn the city down apparently with him, so that's cool. The main story of Cyberpunk 2077 might be a little shorter than The Witcher 3, but it will make up for that with much higher replayability. Now at the same time, they didn't really measure the exact length of the entire game, and they mainly tracked the main story and major side quests, but there are a lot of other side activities to do in the world, so it is kind of hard to compare, but for now it seems Cyberpunk 2077 might be a little bit shorter. So the main reason that they're keeping loot that's useless for players is that even if it's useless for them, it's still something that was useful for the characters in the game, and it wouldn't be logical for all the NPCs to carry only stuff that is beneficial for the player. I mean, this makes a lot of sense. You're not just going to go around peppering people, looting them and picking up the best weapon you can. They're going to have some weapons you don't really want, you're going to have to sell it, break it down, what have you. This is kind of a mainstay of an RPG, I'm not sure why this was a question, but hey, if you were curious, well there's your answer. In regards to continuing the game after the ending, the response was that they found a really cool way to do it, but it's something that the players are going to have to wait and see. They did mention though that they want people to enjoy their game as long as possible. Now on the CD Projekt Red forums a while ago, this question was actually asked by a mod. If I remember correctly, a lot of people wanted a world that was based on the consequences of their actions. The world will have molded slightly to your decisions, and I think that would be a really cool idea. It could be that this is what they're referring to because they do check the forums for ideas fairly often as far as I know, but don't take my word for it, this is just speculation. Now we also did see timed dialogue sequences in the deep dive demo when it comes to Placide. Now apparently if you do take too long to make these decisions, you'll get annoyed comments from NPCs, but there will be some situations like during conversations with Royce and Dum Dum where taking too much time will have consequences. When it comes to side quests, the Witcher 3 quest structure was compared to a single line with a bunch of branches sticking out, which sometimes go back to that single line. In Cyberpunk 2077, those branches grow more branches, which then often tie around each other. Now according to Shavad, the user who posted this seems to mean that side quests will evolve into more side quests, and those quests will have impact on other quests as well as the main storyline to a much greater extent than they did in The Witcher 3. Essentially, if you have say 10 buddies who have played Cyberpunk 2077 in its entirety and you're talking to them about it, you guys are gonna have some very different experiences. This is an element I'm really looking forward to. Now when it comes to car customization, they know this is a pretty often requested feature, but they're asking for a little bit more patience before they say anything about it. It sounds like they do have plans, and Paweł Sasko in one of our community podcasts mentioned that cars have stats, so maybe modifications can augment these stats, but again, this is just speculation. Now while we won't be able to buy new apartments, V's apartment will look differently based on the life path we choose, and it will change in some ways over time. I remember talking to someone in the comments on one of my videos about this, so I guess we got our answer. They've also included certain mechanics tied to V's apartment, which will allow us to express the personality of our V through it, but it's something that they want the players to discover on their own. When it comes to health regeneration, we will be able to restore our health using consumables like food and the drug inhaler. Some of those healing items will have an instant healing effect, whilst others will just slowly restore our health over time or work only under right circumstances. There is also cyberware which will provide us with health regeneration, however it will take a spot that could be used for a more useful piece of cyberware. When it comes to car physics, they definitely want to be more realistic than something like GTA. I actually think GTA hit a nice sweet spot in everything other than collisions. Moving on into the Q&A, apparently the day and night cycle have a pretty organic impact on gameplay. During quests, some places might be less or more guarded based on the time of day. Some story scenes might also change depending on the time of day they're taking place in. When it comes to difficulty settings, they want to include as many differences as possible between each difficulty level beyond just stronger and tougher enemies. Now due to the huge scope of the game, this might be pretty difficult, so they can't promise anything. We're just gonna have to wait and see how this plays out. When it comes to law enforcement, police won't interfere when they see you committing smaller crimes, like for example beating up some random dude on the street, because they treat it like an everyday occurrence in Night City. If they do see you committing more extreme crimes, however, like pulling a gun out and shooting bystanders, or driving through them with your car, they will definitely try to stop you. Going back to 2018, we do have comments about the police not being pushovers and them having some pretty lethal pieces of cyberware, so just be careful on the streets of Night City. Dynamic weather won't affect the gameplay, but the world will react to it. The example they mentioned here was when it rains, people will pull out their umbrellas, and if they don't have umbrellas, they'll go for a place to hide. Players will be able to craft pretty much any usable item, with the exception of clothes and cyberware. However, it will be possible to craft different modifications for those, which will allow modification of their stats and of the way that they look. We already know a lot about the minigames of Cyberpunk 2077. We already have boxing, we have hacking, we have the shooting range, and we have, of course, car racing. According to CDPR, this car racing minigame will have a cyberpunk twist to it, which will really allow us to test the speed limit of our cars. When it comes to owning a cyber pet in the game, the answer was that they know something about it, but they simply won't tell. Moving on to Destructible Environments, you will be able to destroy around 3/4 of the assets around you, but of course you won't be able to go as far as utterly destroying the entire district. Now if we just go to the deep dive and pause for a second and look around, 3/4 of the assets is quite a bit of stuff. Now since the game doesn't have traditional cutscenes like The Witcher 3, a question about skipping cutscenes and dialogues was asked. In their response, they mentioned they developed around 10 different prototypes to address that feature, but ultimately they found something really cool they wish the players to experience for the first time on their own. When it comes to first-person perspective and sex scenes, they mentioned they did a lot of motion capture for these, and that they believe that the amount that they included will satisfy everyone. If you guys were worried about the omission of first-person sex scenes, well there you have it. Moving on, some cyberware will require the Ripperdoc services in order to install it into V, but there will be some cyberware modifications which we might be able to put onto ourselves on the spot. The example that they mentioned was that while only Ripperdocs can install the mechanism of the mantis blades into our arms, afterwards the blades itself can be detached and replaced on our own. Another example was installing the Sandviston upgrade, which will allow us to move as fast as the animals as we saw in the deep dive. Now V also starts off with a base set of augmentations, the Karoshi eye and the subdermal implant, but there's also a translator as well, and at the start it only translates the most common languages in Night City, like Spanish and Japanese. As you upgrade this, you'll be able to understand less common languages like Creole. I know a lot of you guys have been asking about the 2018 version of Chippin' In, and CDPR mentions that their answer for us is to wait and see, and that they're aiming to make as many gamers happy as possible. The diversity of NPC's character models will certainly be greater than The Witcher 3, and they've made an insane amount of them. However, there is still the possibility that due to memory limitations, they might not be able to put all of them in the game. Finally, moving on to the second Reddit post, we have one crucial detail here. Now according to this post, apparently the demo that they've been showing is already a 6-month-old build. Theoretically, that means it was 6 months old around 2 months ago when they released the deep dive, and it was already pretty polished. They have an insane amount of time to refine the game up until release. They also take notes after every single presentation where they show the demo to maybe go back to the drawing board and improve some things. This just makes me really excited to see the next iteration of the build or the final product on April 16. Thank you guys for watching. For more Cyberpunk 2077, join Neon Nation by subscribing to the Neon Arcade.